we're talking about essentially a little bit more complex topic here. So when you have liquidity pool tokens or NFT bonds, how would you essentially set up a reporting strategy for? So we talked about the LP tokens a bit. What about NFT bonds? So this seems to be a new up and coming thing in liquid staking instead of LP tokens. Now we're getting like the LP token is being replaced by NFTs, right? To distinguish a user's position in the liquidity pool. So are we doing the same type of reporting strategy, or are we varying here because now it's an NFT instead of the typical LP tokens that we're used to seeing?
Yeah, this one gets a little bit more interesting, and we'll see how this starts to evolve. And if it does, there's a few, I guess, special things you can do with an NFT. I think a lot of people obviously think about like a profile picture or some kind of piece of art. So maybe we'll just start with saying that's not what we're talking about here. I think there's a lot of different purposes for an NFT. And in this case, it effectively serves as a wrapper around ETH. And that NFT has, you can build in some special applications to it. One being in our case, making that NFT soul bound to the user's wallet, which is interesting as far as creating kind of a collateral. So I guess the purpose of what we use the NFT for is if someone wants to run a validator that takes 32 ETH, but part of liquid staking, I guess, that we didn't get into, and maybe this is more on the operational side, but it allows them to basically liquid staking protocols allow users without 32 ETH, which can be upwards of 60K or depending on the price, even more, to come in and still be a validator on the network, but only have to post maybe a 2 ETH bond. And then they'll get the remaining ETH from the liquidity pool that this liquid staking token is kind of generated. Yeah, I probably didn't do a great job explaining that. I think it would require quite a bit more depth if we wanted to go there. But in this sense, the NFT is effectively wrapped around 2 ETH. So at that point, we do know a cost for that NFT. We know that there's 2 ETH in there. If I wanted to exit, if I wanted to get my ETH back, that's very simple to do so. So that's where pegging or taking that NFT and giving it some kind of clear-cut value, if we know that every time there's 2 ETH in there, that helps with the pricing mechanism. As we just basically know that whenever we get that NFT, we take the price of ETH, we take effectively 2 ETH in that NFT, and we times it by the price, and that gets us our value. And that will help us whenever we enter or get back out. So yeah, I would, in that way, I would treat it very similar. It's kind of a swap in assets. But I guess a case could actually be made for NFTs where maybe it isn't, because you're actually just still holding your ETH. You're just wrapping it in a different contract. So yeah, I think that one kind of still has a lot of leeway and a lot of interpretation that we need to work through. When it comes to other NFTs, I think then it gets much more complicated to give pricing. A lot of people want to just kind of take the floor price for NFT collection or whatever it might be, which is, again, quite difficult because a lot of this stuff is quite illiquid in the end. And it becomes very difficult to price anything that doesn't have a liquid market. And if you try to do so, I just think it's quite inaccurate, because if someone were to flood that market with a number of those tokens, it's going to significantly drive the price down very fast. So a lot of kind of that sensitivity analysis needs to be considered when doing that. So, yeah.
Given the difficulty in pricing these NFT bonds, um, due to the fact that some of these NFT bonds could be less liquid than others, you talked about liquidity being a problem. Um, would you say that pegging NFT bonds is still the most efficient way of reporting them in the balance sheet, or do you envision a more streamlined approach being possible in the near future?
I don't know if we'll get anything in the near future. I think longer term, there could be a lot of interesting applications for this. If the real world asset thesis comes online, I think we can start to see some other I guess, real world assets in many cases wrapped within a similar structure. Um, and at that point, again, it's the pricing is still going to be difficult. I think a lot of these are more illiquid assets for the most part, which require some kind of special pricing and can't quite be automated the same way. I'm probably missing some applications that are available, and I'm sure I'll find some over the next week or so now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, so far, I think that's been a lot of the applications within the NFT space. But I guess within the next 5 years, I would expect to see some more iterations on that and some more liquid markets for some of these NFT structures. And that's not just, again, talking about profile pics, but actually something with hopefully some real utility and some real value that shows a good representation of either an off-chain asset or something on-chain that can be traded easily.
Objective utility for NFTs. We're starting to see a lot more financial applications for them.
Yeah, yeah.
I know we talked about this briefly, and I know that the answer is going to vary depending on jurisdiction. But just to kind of dive into the topic a little bit, sending assets to a DeFi pool, like a staking pool, for example. I understand that your approach is to, if I understand correctly, is to classify those dispositions as taxable events in the context of liquid staking because you're technically getting a different type of crypto asset in return, whether it's a LP token or NFT bond. But do you see anyone in the industry, maybe because they have a different jurisdiction, do you see other people in the industry not recognizing the disposition as taxable and instead classifying them as internal transfers?
Yes, yes, and I think there's a few different jurisdictions I've seen this, and I think there's a few kind of talking to some, I guess, government bodies of those countries or just being a part of that conversation. I think there's some very good cases being made as to those should not be dispositions. I think for me, I'm not typically in a tax jurisdiction, so it's a little bit easier, I think. But I do see the case for that because ultimately, as we talked about, if you deposit your assets, you get a liquid staking token or you get a liquidity provided token or something in return. But that is still a representation of what you put in there. It's not a trade. It's not a swap. You're not giving one asset and necessarily getting the other, and then you have to go back. You could effectively unwrap that whenever you want and get your underlying asset back. So I think it's a very good case to be made that there shouldn't be a disposition on that every single time. If I just want to provide liquidity to a pool and have borrowers on the other side, and maybe I want to earn some interest on it, it doesn't really make sense if I'm still long that same asset to actually record that as kind of a triggering some type of taxable gain or loss or whatever the situation might be. So yes, I think there's a good case to be made on that. The other one that's kind of interesting is obviously once you loan that out, you are earning some kind of trading fee, some kind of yield on that token. And that might be in the way of farming, for example. So if you're getting kind of incentivized by the protocol and receiving their native token, that also gets interesting is how you record that income and what that hits. A lot of those, as we talked about before, e-liquid markets, a lot of those tokens that you might that might represent the protocol that you're providing liquidity to, you might get those from protocol emissions, and actually using those after they might say they have a value, but they might effectively be pumping a significant portion of their total token supply into the ecosystem, meaning that if you were to turn around, you and everyone else providing liquidity and sell it, there's going to be a significant price impact on those tokens. So that I think becomes quite interesting when people are receiving those and it says that there's X price on the token received for providing liquidity. But then in theory, when you actually turn around and go sell it, that price is significantly lower, but you had to report your income or your revenue earned on that higher value initially. I think that's one that a lot of industry people are really trying to figure out a solution around, just to ensure that there isn't some significant over revenue reporting that's required, and really inflating the value and paying the tax bill as a result, when really these are somewhat illiquid assets. So it's finding a good balance where you can still participate, you can still earn these tokens, but you don't, I guess you're not disincentivized to do so because of the tax bill hurting. So I think that's a big challenge that we're going to start to see.
Okay, I see. So your personal position would be, I'm sorry, not personal position, personal opinion,
Yeah.
would be that most of these types of transactions, these deposits into staking pools, should be more internal transfers. But you would say that the argument is more stronger towards the approach that it is a internal transfer because you're not in practice disposing the assets yet, right? Versus what jurisdictions think you are doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a big educational piece, and it's pretty complicated stuff. So I think we've seen like a lot of advancements there from like regulators and whoever it might be understanding that. But I think the case still needs to be made. I think we still really need to provide support on why we think that. And I think we can get there. But yeah, I guess that's what I would like to see, because I don't know that it makes sense every time you want to provide liquidity that should hit you with a taxable disposition. I think it's somewhat disincentivizes a lot of activity on chain.
Yeah, that's a very good take. If we want to incentivize more financial DeFi activity, then we want to incentivize the argument that these deposits are more internal transfers. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a whether which direction jurisdictions take here could really alter the history of DeFi. So that's a quite big topic there.
Yeah,
For
or I
regular.
mean, the people who are actually trading just do it anyways, and then from an accounting perspective, we just got to figure out how to do it. But at some point, I mean, if you are incurring significant taxable capital gains or income that significantly increases your taxable income, then it may not become as profitable as it might otherwise be. So that is other things to consider.
Yeah,